By 2025, nearly 4 years after Gabby Petito was murdered and 2 years since the civil case is concluded, her name had become more than a headline. It had become a movement. Gabby's death and the way her disappearance unfolded publicly across the internet reshaped how America talked about intimate partner violence, media coverage of missing persons, and law enforcement accountability. Her parents, Joseph Petito and Nicole Schmidt, refused to let the world forget who Gabby was. A joyful, creative, 22-year-old who just wanted to travel, tell stories, and live freely. But Gabby's life, and the horrifying way it ended, had become a symbol for something larger: the hidden epidemic of coercive control in romantic relationships. After Brian Laundrie's notebook confession and suicide closed a criminal investigation, Gabby's family turned their focus toward activism and change. In 2021, they founded the Gabby Petito Foundation, a nonprofit organization aimed at helping families of missing persons and supporting survivors of domestic violence. One of the Petito family's earliest efforts was legislative. They began pushing for reforms in how missing persons cases are handled, especially when emotional or psychological abuse may be involved. The result was a wave of legislation, informally known as Gabby's Law. While there isn't a single federal bill under that name, multiple U.S. states passed legislation inspired by Gabby's case between 2022 and 2024. These laws addressed improved reporting systems for missing adults, especially young women, faster interagency cooperation between local, state, and federal authorities, enhanced domestic violence training for police, particularly around emotional abuse, isolation, and coercive control, areas often overlooked because there are no bruises or broken bones, technology-based response enhancements, including data-sharing platforms that flag red flags across states, e.g., when a partner returns home alone in a shared vehicle after traveling with a missing person. Some laws require that 911 calls involving domestic disputes be cross-referenced with early reports or signs of control or manipulation, a direct response to failure in Moab, Utah. In Gabby's case, a 911 caller had reported seeing Brian hit her. Police ultimately labeled Gabby the primary aggressor after interviewing both parties, and no charges were filed. That moment was pivotal, and a widely acknowledged failure. In hindsight, experts concluded that the officers had failed to recognize Gabby's panic, distress, and conditioned behavior often seen in emotional abuse victims. Gabby's story made one thing clear: you don't have to be bruised to be abused. Before Gabby's case, many people, law enforcement included, equated domestic abuse with visible violence: hitting, punching, choking. But Gabby's story revealed that abuse often hides behind smiles, in the subtle power dynamics of a toxic relationship. After her death, the term coercive control entered mainstream conversations across the U.S. Coercive control refers to a pattern of behavior that isolates, intimidates, and dominates a partner. It can include restricting communication with family or friends, monitoring social media or phone use, controlling finances or travel, gaslighting, manipulating someone into questioning their reality, emotional manipulation, and dependency. In many ways, Gabby had exhibited these warning signs. She had distanced herself from some friends during her travels. She became increasingly anxious and tearful. In the Moab body cam footage, she blamed herself for everything and minimized Brian's behavior. These are all hallmarks of coercive control. Several states, including California, New York, and Colorado, began considering or passing bills to include coercive control in their definitions of domestic violence. This made it possible for victims to seek restraining orders or protection, even if no physical violence had yet occurred. Gabby's parents publicly supported this movement. In every interview, every public event, every school assembly or legislative hearing, they emphasized, Gabby didn't know she was in danger until it was too late. Neither did we. The Moab police stop was and remains one of the most debated moments in the Gabby Petito story. In 2022, an independent investigation concluded the officers made several unintentional but critical errors. Body cam footage showed Gabby breaking down in tears, blaming herself, and admitting to slapping Brian during a panic episode. Meanwhile, Brian remained calm, articulate, and in control. The officer's decision to label her the aggressor rather than recognize the signs of emotional distress and victim behavior, led to no arrest, and the couple was separated only for a night. In the wake of public outcry, Moab Police Department implemented mandatory retraining for officers on handling domestic violence cases. Departments across the country followed suit. By 2023, more than a dozen U.S. states had adopted specialized training programs teaching officers to identify non-physical signs of abuse, separate victims and abusers during questioning, use trauma-informed language, prioritize safety over technical policy. Gabby's case had become part of law enforcement training materials nationwide. The Petito family didn't stop at awareness. Through their foundation, they launched search and rescue funding programs, support for domestic violence shelters, and grants for families of missing persons who couldn't afford private investigators or travel costs. They also created partnerships with other high-profile foundations, including the National Domestic Violence Hotline, RAIN, and Black and Missing Foundation, recognizing that many victims of color or from marginalized communities don't receive the same media coverage that Gabby's case had. They made a point to emphasize this in every interview. Gabby's father, Joseph Petito, often said, "We got attention because we were loud, because we had access. But so many other families are still searching for their loved ones, and no one hears them." They created a missing persons dashboard that provided resources for families to build awareness, submit tips, and share their stories with journalists and law enforcement. Gabby's story drew millions of followers, but also reignited an uncomfortable conversation in America. Why do some missing persons get coverage while others don't? Critics, including journalists and activists, pointed to what is often called missing white woman syndrome, a pattern where media focuses heavily on missing white, middle-class women, while overlooking missing people of color, LGBTQ+ individuals, or those from poor communities. In response, Gabby's family used their platform to elevate those voices. At several press conferences, they called attention to other missing women, especially Native American women in Wyoming, where Gabby's body had been found. One study revealed that 710 indigenous people were reported missing in Wyoming between 2011 and 2020, most receiving little to no press. Gabby's mother said, "If Gabby's story can help bring attention to other families, then something good can come from this nightmare." In 2025, the release of Netflix's American Murder, Gabby Petito, docuseries reignited public interest in the case. Viewers were struck by how normal Gabby and Brian seemed. Their YouTube vlogs, their Instagram stories, the viral body cam footage, all felt painfully real. The series included interviews with Gabby's parents, audio from Brian's confession notebook, police investigators, and even domestic violence experts. More than 45 million people streamed the documentary in its first month. Social media continued to discuss the case in depth on Reddit, YouTube, and TikTok. Young women across platforms began sharing stories of coercive relationships, posting warning signs, and creating resource videos for others. Gabby had become a tragic teacher, a cautionary tale turned catalyst. Gabby Petito's story is not just about a murder. It's about the gaps in systems, in law enforcement, in legislation, in public perception, that allowed warning signs to be missed, dismissed, or ignored. But it's also a story of transformation. Her family took their grief and turned it into advocacy. Her name became a rallying cry for better protections, deeper empathy, and earlier intervention. Gabby Petito wanted to explore the world. In the end, her story changed it.